You know, to date, we've depended on this oversized, bloated financial sector and essentially a property bubble to kind of keep the economy going and trickle some trickling down into the economy. We've had policies like the Bank of England actually creating money out of nothing, £445 billion through QE to try and get the economy going. All it's done is made the rich richer by flooding stock markets. We've had the government following fiscal austerity where it's cut back, and we've had 7 years of wages falling and private debt getting higher. And don't forget, the Bank of England has said this week that the biggest risk of financial stability is high private debt. So we're looking to, towards a high debt, low wage economy. I think that we all need to kind of wake up and have a conversation with ourselves. If we want to turn this economy around, if we want the UK economy to work for most people, then we need to actually change things quite drastically. And we need to, start with stopping ideologically cutting public sector pay for absolutely no reason.
Well, given all of that, Fran, you must have been very interested to see this this conveyor belt of cabinet ministers coming forward and suggesting that now is the time to look again at that public sector pay cap. I mean, how much of that do you think is to do with some Damascene conversion on their part? How much to do with just the naked politics of a party which has a very, very slender majority?
Well, I think it's obviously a bit of both, and it just kind of shows how empty these phrases we've heard coming out of the Conservatives for the last few years are. Osborne's long-term economic plan, Theresa May's strong and stable. With Brexit, we can see that there was actually no meaning behind those statements because they don't have a long-term plan for this economy. The data this week from the GDP figures was that the UK's savings ratio is at its lowest since records began. We are relying on people getting into more debt in order to keep this economy going. And I think most people in this country are pretty much fed up of it and they want a pay rise. And that is a symptom of a bigger problem around how our economy works. And we need some serious leadership if we're going to turn it around in the next couple of decades.
Alex, just a final word from you. I mean, despite the efforts of your organisation, if you look at the list of people that have come out and talked today, Justine Greening, Jeremy Hunt, Michael Gove, it would appear that if Theresa May wants to stay in number 10, austerity as we know it is about to come to an end.
Well, austerity is going to be around whether or not the politicians like it. Eventually, we're going to have to pay back these vast sums of money that we're borrowing. But with pay, I do think there is, in the public sector, I do think there is a case for some pay increases in some areas. But the problem we have is we have national pay bargaining, and all of this is decided centrally, and what that leads to is people in sort of poorer parts of the UK, places like the North East and the South West, being relatively overpaid, and public sector workers in places like London being relatively underpaid. And this is actually very bad for things like NHS trusts, who do struggle to recruit nurses and then have to buy in agency workers who are even more expensive. It's very bad for HR planning, and it's very bad for health outcomes. But the other thing that we need to look at when we talk about pay is we really do need to look at the whole package here, and particularly pensions, because public sector pensions are vastly more generous than private sector pensions, even after the sort of relatively modest reforms that we had 5 or 6 years ago. If you were to try and replicate an NHS pension in the private sector, you'd need to be putting away about 45% of your gross salary. That's just completely unrealistic for most people working in the private sector. So we can't just look at pay. We've really got to look at the way in which pay bargaining is done, and also look at the pensions and all of the other perks. I mean, job security is far, far greater in the public sector. They get more holiday, they take more sick leave. So we've really got to look at the whole package rather than just sort of headline salaries and percentages. And also, I mean, the public sector isn't just nurses and police, ambulance, etc. There's 350,000 bureaucrats working in the civil service. I mean, do we think that all of them should get a pay rise as well? So I really think a little bit more even-handed approach to this is required.
I think there are 350,000 civil servants who would probably argue that instead. Alex,
I'm sure
Alex Wilde from the Taxpayers Alliance, Fran Boyd, Executive Director at Positive Money. Many thanks to both of you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, thousands of protesters are marching in the city of Hamburg against the G20 summit taking place next week. They're calling for more action on issues such as inequality and climate change. Leaders from the world's 20 largest economies will meet from Thursday to Saturday. China has just launched another rocket into space as the country presses on with its ambitious space programme. The rocket, which was designed to lift space station components, deep space probes and communication satellites into orbit, is able to carry up to 25 tonnes. Now, there are calls for towns and cities across the UK to install drinking water fountains in a bid to cut down on the millions of plastic bottles thrown away every year. Campaigners in Bristol have been taking things into their own hands, setting up a network of refilling points across the city. And Sky's Rebecca Williams took her empty bottle and went to meet them.
Introduced in 1859, this is London's oldest drinking fountain. It was unveiled by the Quaker Sam Gurney in a bid to wean people off alcohol in the 19th century.
He was really interested in temperance. He really wanted to keep people away from the public house. So providing free water was obviously one of the ways that they thought they could achieve that.
But nowadays it's hoped water fountains will instead help wean people off plastic water bottles. This one was unveiled in 2010 to do just that. Since the 1980s, water fountains have undoubtedly been in decline because adverts like this started to promote bottled water.
We've had a real growth in the bottled water market in this country. There was the real fitness culture, aerobics. We had Jane Fonda's workouts selling masses of copies in 1982 and people wanting to be lycra clad and swigging bottles of water and getting the body beautiful.
But in Bristol, the water fountain is now making a comeback. The aim is to cut back on our plastic use. And here there are calls for local businesses to sponsor drinking fountains across the city. Bristol is now a refillable city. Hundreds of bars and cafes allow people here to fill up for free.
The idea behind Refill is to have nice friendly stickers and posters on windows of cafes, which encourages people to come in and feel comfortable about coming in and saying, hi, do you mind if I fill this up? So we've got over 200 refill stations in Bristol and people have really got behind it.
In their heyday, drinking fountains were well used across the UK. In fact, their popularity encouraged other countries, like the United States, to also adopt them. And it's hoped a revival in big cities such as Bristol could now help cut back on the millions of plastic bottles that make their way into our rivers and oceans every year. Rebecca Williams, Sky News.
And Sky News launched its Sky Ocean Rescue campaign earlier this year, aimed at reducing the amount of plastic waste that ends up in the world's seas. And you can do your bit to protect our oceans and swap out single-use plastic from your life. You can learn more and join in with the campaign at skyoceanrescue.com. Do share your stories using the hashtag OceanHero. Coming up next in the sport, will Andy Murray be fully fit to defend his Wimbledon title?
Hi, I'm Hannah Stott with the latest showbiz news. A warning, some flash photography is coming up. A sequel to 1995 Robin Williams' classic Jumanji is being released in December, and after months of speculation by fans of the original, Sony Pictures have released a first look at Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle. The film stars Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Jack Black, seen here during filming.
This time, I like to tell people it's in the game. Because the Robin Williams one, they're playing this board game and the jungle kind of escapes from the game into the real world. But in our movie, we all get sucked into the game, and the whole movie takes place essentially in the jungles of Jumanji. And that's the main difference between our films, you know.
What, babe?
Where the rest of me?
Oh my God. Bridge?
Yeah, I'm Fridge. Who are you?
It's me, Spencer.
Who is she?
Martha? I think we got sucked into the game, and we've all become the avatars we chose.
So that means I'm
Bethany?
Country music singer Garth Brooks has serenaded astronauts at the International Space Station from NASA's Space Center in Houston. He sang live as they circled 200 miles above the Earth at a speed of 5 miles a second.
No, a dream is like a river, ever changing as it flows.
Michelle Rodriguez is threatening to leave the Fast and the Furious franchise unless its female characters are treated differently. She wrote on Instagram that she hopes filmmakers decide to show some love to the women of the franchise in its next installment. If not, she says she just might have to say goodbye. And Rob Lowe has said he thought he was going to be killed during an encounter with a Bigfoot creature while filming his new A&E docuseries. Lowe revealed he and his sons were camping in the Ozark Mountains to investigate an unknown animal known to locals as a wood ape during a shoot for the Lowe Files when something began to approach their camp. He said he was lying on the ground thinking he was going to be killed. The Lowe Files follows the actor and his sons Matthew and John Owen as they explore mysterious phenomena across America.
Now, as promised, time for a roundup of the day's sport.
This sports bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Get healthy, get rewarded.
This is Sky Sports News HQ, and these are your top stories. The New Zealand player Sonny Bill Williams has been suspended for 4 weeks for his dangerous tackle in the second test against the Lions. It means he'll miss the deciding test in Auckland next weekend. The Lions player Sean O'Brien could also miss that match. The Ireland flanker has been cited for allegedly striking the All Blacks winger Waisaki Naholo during the second test. His hearing also takes place today.
He's the barometer of our energy and aggression in the game. His ball pressure, his tackling, his carrying. I think he's been outstanding. We'll deal with that as and when. We've got a class group of back rowers. And I'd have no qualms about anyone else stepping up.
We understand West Brom are set to sign Jay Rodriguez from Southampton for £15 million. Rodriguez has started just 12 games in the last 3 years because of injury problems. The initial fee is believed to be £12 million, with £3 million in add-ons. Chelsea have made their first signing of the summer. Goalkeeper Willy Caballero is heading to Stamford Bridge after being released by Manchester City. In boxing, Manny Pacquiao has lost his WBO World Welterweight title. It went to 12 rounds, but he was beaten on a unanimous points decision by Australian Jeff Horn in Brisbane. A controversial decision, this one, though, with many believing he'd done enough to win the fight against Horn, who's actually a former schoolteacher. Pacquiao has now lost 4 of his last 9 fights. The world heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua has hinted he might not fight Vladimir Klitschko again. The British boxer told Sky Sports his opponent may not have the motivation for another tough bout.
To already fight someone you fought, we need some options to get that fire going again. And if not, when you have a belt, there's mandatory positions that I have to face, and one of them is Kubrat Pulev. Bulgarian fighter, very talented, and if I don't fight Klitschko, this is the other guy I'll have to compete with in the future.
Vitality. Get healthy, get rewarded.
Just got time for a quick look at the weather.
A tranquil air rests over Doha as the sun shines bright above Miami.
For much of England and Wales, it will be dry with sunny spells today. Northern Ireland and the Republic will be fine, if a bit cloudy. Showers affecting parts of Scotland. Some of them heavy, will be mainly across the north of Scotland, where it will also be rather breezy. During the afternoon, showery outbreaks of rain pushing into western parts of Ireland. Clouds increasing across the western fringes of England and Wales. Bands of showery rain will spread southeastwards overnight from Scotland, Northern Ireland and Ireland into northern England and Wales.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, that's all from me. Rebecca Williams up next with much more on Theresa May's ministers putting pressure on her to loosen the public purse strings.
This is Sky News at 2, our main story. Theresa May under renewed pressure from senior Conservatives to scrap the public sector pay gap. Fishing deal cast away, the UK pulls out of an international agreement allowing other countries to trawl our waters. France's president calls on African leaders to join forces to take on terrorist thugs and murderers.